The Earthling bought a warrior Amazon and forever changed her destiny. The sky was a dark orange, streaked with purple clouds, and the ground below was jagged, full of mountains and deep valleys. Smoke rose from some areas, and the land seemed harsh and unforgiving. This planet was known for its warriors. The people here had trained their daughters from birth to fight, and these warriors were feared across the galaxy. Humans were rare visitors, but Ethan had a job to do. He needed resources, and sometimes rare items could be found in unexpected places. The ship landed on a flat plateau near the largest city. Ethan stepped out, feeling the rough, rocky ground under his boots. The air was thick and smelled faintly of sulfur, but he was used to strange planets. He had traveled across many worlds, and each one had its own dangers. This place was no different. As he walked toward the city, he saw people everywhere. They were tall and muscular, wearing armor that shone in the dim sunlight. Their eyes were sharp, and their movements were quick and precise. Ethan knew he was in a place where only the strong survived. In the center of the city was a large market. Traders shouted, offering goods that ranged from weapons to rare foods. Humans were uncommon here, and many people stared as Ethan passed. He reached a stall that displayed small metal devices. He was examining one when he noticed a group of women approaching. They moved with the grace of trained soldiers, their presence commanding attention. Ethan's eyes were drawn to one in particular. She was taller than the others, with strong shoulders and a lean body built for combat. Her eyes were a striking green, and her hair was tied back tightly. Her armor was simple but effective, showing scars from many battles. Ethan felt a strange sense of curiosity. She looked confident and proud, and yet there was something in her expression, a flicker of weariness. He realized that despite her strength, she might not be entirely free. People like her were often bound to their empire, used as weapons. The woman noticed him staring. Her eyes narrowed and she stepped closer. Ethan raised his hand slightly, a gesture of peace. "You are a human," she said in a firm voice. Her English was accented but clear. "Yes," Ethan replied. "I am. My name is Ethan Clark. I mean no harm." The woman studied him for a moment. "You should leave. Humans are not welcome here." "I am not here to fight," Ethan said calmly. "I am looking for something rare, something only your people might have." Her eyes flickered with interest. "And why should I help you?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because I can offer you freedom. You do not have to be here if you do not want to. You can come with me. I can take you to a place where no one can control you." The woman's expression changed slightly. Surprise, then skepticism. "Freedom. Humans talk too much about freedom. You do not understand what it means to be a warrior here." "I understand enough to see that you do not belong to anyone," Ethan said. "You are strong, skilled, and smart. You deserve to choose your own path." The woman's eyes softened just a little. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, with a small nod, she said, "I am Leela Kane. If I go with you, I go because I choose to." Ethan felt a small surge of relief. "That is all I ask, nothing more." Leela Kane looked around at the market one last time. The stalls, the traders, the people who had trained her, controlled her, and used her. Everything felt like a cage. She had been trained to fight, to obey commands, to win battles for her empire. And yet here was a human, a stranger, offering something she had never had, a choice. She followed Ethan to his ship. As they walked, Ethan noticed the way she moved, every step measured, controlled. He realized she was constantly aware of her surroundings, always ready to react. This was not someone who could be underestimated. He had to be careful, but he also felt a strange admiration. The ship was large enough to hold them comfortably. Ethan opened the main door, and Leela stepped inside, her eyes scanning everything. "This place is different," she said. "It is called a spaceship," Ethan explained. "It will take us to another world, a place called Earth." "Earth," Leela repeated. The word sounded strange, like something from a story. "I have heard of your world. It is soft, weak." "Humans are not strong like us," Ethan laughed softly. "Strength is not always measured by muscles or weapons. Sometimes it is measured by your mind, your courage, and the choices you make. You will see what I mean." Leela did not respond. She had no reason to trust him yet. She had been trained her entire life to survive, to fight, and to obey. But something about this human made her pause. He did not fear her. He did not try to control her. And that was unusual. They prepared the ship for departure. Ethan checked the engines and the navigation systems, making sure everything was in order. Leela watched him, curiosity mixed with caution. She had never been on a ship like this. On her planet, most travel was done by walking, riding beasts, or using simple vehicles. This ship, with its smooth floors and humming engines, was unlike anything she had seen. When everything was ready, Ethan activated the engines. The ship lifted off the ground slowly at first, then faster. Leela pressed her hands against the wall, feeling the vibrations. Her heart raced, but not with fear, something else. Excitement, maybe, or anticipation. As they left the atmosphere, Leela saw the planet shrinking beneath them. The mountains, the valleys, the cities, all became tiny. She felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. She was leaving her home, her people, and everything she had ever known. Yet, for the first time, she felt a sense of possibility. Ethan glanced at her. "You will not have to fight unless you choose to. You will not have to obey unless you want to. This is your chance to decide who you are." Leela looked out the viewport again. She thought of the battles she had fought, the people she had been forced to serve, and the life she had never truly chosen. For the first time, she felt free. The journey through space was long. Days passed, and Leela learned to move around the ship, to understand its systems, and even to operate some of the controls under Ethan's guidance. She was quick to learn, her mind sharp and disciplined. Ethan watched her, impressed not just by her strength, but by her intelligence and adaptability. They shared stories during the long hours. Ethan told her about Earth, its oceans, forests, cities, and people. Leela listened intently, fascinated by a world so different from her own. She asked questions, sometimes simple, sometimes complex, trying to understand the ways of humans. Ethan answered patiently, sometimes laughing at her mistakes, but always encouraging her curiosity. At night, when the ship was quiet, Leela stood by the viewport, looking at the stars. She thought of her past, of the life she had been forced to live. She thought of her training, the endless drills, the battles, the orders she had to follow. And she thought of this human who had given her something no one else ever had, a choice. Ethan came to stand beside her. "Do you regret coming with me?" he asked quietly. Leela shook her head. "No, I do not know what will happen, but at least I am not controlled. I can make my own decisions." "That is all anyone can ask for," Ethan said. For the first time, Leela felt a sense of hope. She did not know what the future held, but she knew she would face it on her own terms. And perhaps with this human by her side, she might even find something she had never imagined: trust, friendship, or even companionship. The stars stretched endlessly around them, silent witnesses to the beginning of a new chapter in Leela Kane's life. A chapter where she was no longer just a warrior for an empire. She was herself. She was free. As the ship traveled deeper into space, Leela trained in the ship's small gym, testing her strength and endurance. Ethan watched her, sometimes joining in exercises to show her new techniques. They sparred lightly, not as enemies, but as partners learning from each other. Leela began to understand not just her own power, but the power of strategy, teamwork, and adaptation. By the time the planet of Earth came into view, Leela had changed in small but meaningful ways. She was still a warrior, strong and fearless, but she was also learning to think in new ways, to make decisions based on more than duty, to trust another being who was not part of her world. Ethan noticed the change too. The girl who had once been cautious and skeptical now looked curious and ready for whatever awaited them. He felt a quiet satisfaction. This was only the beginning, but already her destiny had begun to shift. The ship began its descent toward Earth. Leela braced herself, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had left everything familiar behind, and in its place was a world unknown, full of possibilities. A world where she could finally define who she truly was. And for the first time in her life, Leela Kane smiled, not as a soldier bound to an empire, but as someone who was truly free. The journey through space was long, but it gave Leela Kane time to think. She had left her home planet behind, a place of rigid rules and constant battles. Now, traveling with a human named Ethan Clark, she had the chance to understand a different way of life. Each day, she explored the ship, learning its systems and the ways humans lived. She had never been on a ship like this before, and every new detail fascinated her. Ethan showed her how the navigation worked. "This will help us know where we are in space," he explained, pointing to a glowing map of stars and planets. Leela studied it carefully, her green eyes sharp. She was used to learning quickly. Back on her planet, mistakes could cost lives, so she had developed a careful attention to detail. "I do not understand all of it yet," she said honestly, "but I will learn." "You will," Ethan said. "You learn fast. You already know more than most humans would after a month." Leela glanced at him, a small smile on her face. It is easy to learn when your life depends on it. I have survived battles where one mistake meant death. Ethan nodded. I can see that, but sometimes survival is not just about strength or skill. It is also about thinking ahead, understanding people, and choosing the right moment to act. That is something humans do well. She looked at him, curious. You mean humans are clever in ways that are different from warriors? Yes, Ethan said. Strength is not always about muscles or weapons. Sometimes it is about ideas, timing, and courage. Leela considered this. She had been trained to fight, to follow orders, to obey commands. Now she was learning that there was another way to win, one that did not rely on brute force alone. Days passed, and they began to talk more about their worlds. Ethan told her about Earth cities, its oceans, and its forests. He explained that people there could live very different lives, choosing jobs, hobbies, and friends. Leela listened closely, trying to imagine a world so soft and calm compared to her own. Humans seem weak, she said one day. Your people do not fight like us. You do not train from birth, you do not prepare for war constantly. That is true, Ethan said, but we have our own ways of being strong. We fight in other ways, sometimes with courage, sometimes with cleverness, and sometimes by working together. Leela thought about that. On her planet, working together was important, but everyone also relied on their own skill. Humans seemed different. They used teamwork, creativity, and unexpected ideas to overcome problems. It was interesting. During the journey, they encountered small space storms. The ship shuddered and alarms rang. Leela's instincts took over immediately. She moved to the control panels, helping Ethan steady the ship. Her hands were precise, her reactions fast. Ethan watched in admiration. She was not only strong, but she could also think quickly under pressure. You are amazing, he said once the storm passed. Most humans would panic, Leela shrugged. I have faced worse. On my planet, storms and dangers are common. You learn to survive or you die. Ethan smiled. I can see that, and now you are learning a new way to survive too. As they traveled, Ethan introduced her to some of the ship's basic technology. Leela learned to operate small machines, to read star maps, and to use communication devices. At first, she struggled, frustrated by the complexity, but she did not give up. Her determination and discipline carried her through. I am not used to technology like this, she admitted one evening. Everything is so different from what I know. That is okay, Ethan said kindly. You will get used to it, and even if you never fully understand everything, you can still use it in your own way. Leela watched him closely. She noticed that Ethan treated her as an equal. He did not order her around, he did not expect her to obey. That was unusual. On her planet, warriors were often treated as tools. She had been trained to obey, but here she was learning something entirely new: choice. One day, as they traveled, they spotted another ship approaching. It was sleek, fast, and clearly not from Earth. Ethan quickly identified it as a patrol from Leela's home planet. Their empire had noticed her absence and was sending a retrieval team. They have come for you, Ethan said calmly. We need to prepare. Leela's eyes narrowed. They will not take me back, I will not go. Ethan nodded. I know, but we must be careful. They are skilled fighters and they will try to trap us. Leela prepared herself. She strapped on her armor and checked her weapons. She felt the familiar weight of her sword and the cool feel of her energy rifle. Fighting was part of her life, but now she fought on her own terms. When the enemy ship arrived, it fired warning shots. Ethan skillfully maneuvered their ship, dodging attacks while keeping them on course. Leela used the ship's systems to aim weapons, striking back when necessary. Together, they made a formidable team. Ethan used strategy and quick thinking, while Leela used strength and precision. The battle lasted for hours. Leela's skills surprised her enemies. They had trained her for combat, but now she was learning to fight with a partner who could think differently. Ethan's ideas complemented her instincts, and they forced the attackers to retreat. After the battle, Leela sat quietly, her armor dented, her sword slightly scratched. She looked at Ethan. Your way of fighting, it is different. I have never fought like this before. Ethan smiled. And you have never fought with me before. We are learning from each other. Leela nodded. She realized that she was beginning to trust him. She was beginning to understand that strength was not only about muscles or weapons. It was also about ideas, planning, and trust. As they continued toward Earth, their bond grew stronger. They shared meals in the small dining area of the ship, laughing at simple things and telling stories of their pasts. Leela told Ethan about her training, the battles she had fought, and the rules of her people. Ethan told her about his life on Earth, his family, and his adventures across the stars. One evening, as they watched a distant nebula, Leela asked, "Do humans always rely on machines and tools? Do you not fear that you will fail if your strength is not enough?" Ethan thought for a moment. "We do rely on tools, but we also rely on each other. Sometimes our strength is not enough alone, but together we can achieve more than we ever could by ourselves." Leela considered this. On her planet, warriors often fought alone or in small groups, following strict rules. Humans were different. They believed in teamwork, trust, and creativity. It was a new way of thinking, and she found herself drawn to it. The days passed, and Leela trained in new ways. She practiced hand-to-hand combat, learned to use human weapons, and studied strategy with Ethan. Each lesson made her stronger, but also smarter. She began to see that her strength alone was not the only path to victory. Planning, understanding, and adaptability were just as important. One morning, as they approached a star system near Earth, Leela looked at the blue planet below. Oceans stretched across its surface, and green forests dotted the land. Cities sparkled in the sunlight. She felt a mixture of awe and uncertainty. This was a world unlike any she had ever known. "Is this Earth?" she asked softly. "Yes," Ethan said. "We are almost there. You will see that life here is very different. You can be yourself. You can choose what you want to do." Leela took a deep breath. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of possibility. She had left her past behind, survived battles, and learned new ways of thinking. Now, she was about to step into a world where she could define her own destiny. As the ship descended, Leela felt excitement and nervousness. She looked at Ethan. "I do not know what awaits me there, but I am ready. I will face it on my own terms." Ethan smiled. "And I will be there with you, not to control you, but to help when you need it." You are no longer alone. For the first time, Leela Kane felt truly free. She was no longer a weapon for an empire, no longer bound by rules she had not chosen. She was herself. Strong, skilled, and independent, but also learning new ways to fight, think, and live. The blue planet grew larger as they approached. Leela watched it with wide eyes. She had survived storms in space, battles with enemies, and challenges to her trust. Now she was about to face the greatest adventure of all, life on a new world with the freedom to choose her own path. And for the first time, Leela Kane smiled, not as a warrior bound by duty, but as someone who had the power to shape her own destiny. The blue planet grew larger in the viewport, and Leela Kane felt a mixture of wonder and unease. She had survived storms, space battles, and the strange lessons of human life, but now her past was closing in. Ethan noticed the tension in her stance. "They are still following us," he said quietly. "Their sensors are better than I expected. They will not give up easily." Leela's green eyes narrowed. "They think they can take me back. They do not understand that I am not theirs to command anymore." Ethan nodded. "They will try anyway. We need to be ready." Leela prepared her weapons, checking the energy rifle and the blade she always carried. Her armor was scratched from previous skirmishes, but she adjusted it carefully. Ethan watched her, impressed not just by her skill, but by her focus and calm under pressure. "They are warriors," Leela said. "They will not hesitate. You must be careful." "I know," Ethan replied. "And so must you. But remember, we are stronger together." When the enemy ship appeared in the distance, they fired warning shots. Ethan maneuvered the ship skillfully, dodging the blasts while keeping Leela in a position to respond. Leela aimed her weapons, striking the attackers with precise shots. Her training and instinct combined with Ethan's tactics created a perfect defense. The attackers did not expect humans to be so clever. They had underestimated Ethan's ability to predict their moves, and they had underestimated Leela's ability to adapt. Each attack they launched was met with a counterattack that forced them to retreat moment by moment. Leela's heart raced, but she felt a strange sense of calm. This was familiar in a way. On her planet, she had fought countless enemies. The difference here was that she was not fighting under someone else's orders. She was choosing her battles, deciding her own actions, and trusting someone else to work with her, not against her. After hours of tense fighting, the enemy ship was forced to retreat. Leela lowered her weapons, breathing steadily. She glanced at Ethan. "You fought well," he said. "I could not have done it without you." "You were clever," she replied. "Your ideas, they are different from anything I have known. I see now that strength is not just about weapons." Ethan smiled. "And you have shown me that skill, courage, and training are just as important as cleverness. Together, we are stronger." For a while, the ship was quiet. Leela looked out at the planet below, thinking about the life waiting for her there. She had come a long way from her home world, from the empire that had controlled her. And now, for the first time, she had a choice. As they descended into Earth's atmosphere, the air grew thicker and the planet's surface came into focus. Cities stretched across continents, and green forests and blue oceans seemed endless. Leela felt awe at the sight. It was nothing like her harsh, rocky home planet. This world was alive, soft, and full of possibilities. Ethan guided the ship to a safe landing in a remote area, away from prying eyes. The ship touched down with a soft thrum, and Leela stepped out cautiously. The ground was solid and unfamiliar. The air smelled different, clean, and fresh, unlike the sulfur-filled skies of her planet. She took a deep breath, feeling the sun warm her face. "This is Earth," Ethan said. "It is not perfect, but it is home to millions of people. You can learn to live here if you choose." Leela looked around, trying to imagine her life in this world. She had fought battles, faced death, and followed strict rules her entire life. Here, she could make her own rules. She could decide what kind of person she wanted to be. "I want to learn," she said finally. "I want to understand this place, but I also want to be ready. If my people find me again, I must be strong." Ethan nodded. "We will be ready, and you will not be alone." They spent the next few days preparing. Leela trained daily, combining her warrior skills with the new strategies Ethan taught her. They explored the surrounding forests, practicing stealth, survival, and teamwork. Leela learned to adapt to Earth's environment, discovering ways to use nature to her advantage. One evening, while resting beside a stream, Leela asked, "Do humans always live like this, with choices and freedom?" Ethan nodded. "Most humans do. We make mistakes, but we also have chances to learn and grow. You will see. Life here is not always easy, but it is yours to live." Leela looked at him thoughtfully. "It is strange. I have always been told that freedom is dangerous, that without rules we will fail, but here it feels possible." "You are learning to trust yourself," Ethan said. "That is the first step. Trust in your own decisions and in the people who choose to help you." Their peaceful time was interrupted one night by an alarm. Leela's past had finally caught up with them. A group of elite soldiers from her home planet had arrived, hidden among the forests near their landing site. They were skilled, trained to capture her without question. "They are here," Leela whispered. She moved quickly, checking her weapons. Ethan followed calmly, preparing the ship for a possible escape. The first soldiers appeared from the trees. They were fast, moving with deadly precision. Leela and Ethan did not wait for an attack. They acted immediately. Leela's movements were fluid, a combination of strength and skill. She disarmed one soldier quickly, then used his momentum to throw him into the others. Ethan supported her with calculated maneuvers, using the terrain to slow the attackers. He was not a warrior like Leela, but he was clever. He set traps, created distractions, and guided Leela to positions where her skill was most effective. The soldiers were surprised. They expected a frightened human and a lone warrior. Instead, they faced a coordinated team that anticipated their moves. Leela's instincts and Ethan's strategies created a force they could not easily overcome. The fight continued for hours. Leela's armor was scratched, and her weapons showed signs of heavy use, but she did not falter. Every move she made was precise, every strike intentional. Ethan's calm guidance allowed her to conserve energy and strike where it mattered most. At one point, a soldier managed to get close to Ethan, but Leela reacted instantly. She blocked the attack, striking the soldier down with a force that sent him sprawling. Ethan nodded, silently acknowledging her skill and timing. Finally, the remaining soldiers realized they could not win. They retreated into the forest, leaving Leela and Ethan standing together, victorious but exhausted. "You fought well," Ethan said, looking at her. "You are stronger than I imagined." Leela lowered her weapons, breathing heavily. "I have always been strong," she said, "but now I see that strength alone is not enough. Strategy, timing, and trust, these matter too." Ethan nodded. "And you have learned them quickly. You are not just a warrior anymore. You are a leader, someone who can face challenges on her own terms." Leela felt a sense of pride she had never experienced before. On her planet, victories were often meaningless, expected, demanded, and forgotten. Here, each victory mattered because she had chosen it herself. The next morning, they surveyed the forest. Ethan showed Leela how to set up defensive positions, use natural terrain for cover, and create signals in case of future attacks. Leela absorbed every lesson, realizing that survival was not just about fighting. It was about planning, thinking ahead, and understanding your environment. As they trained, Leela began to understand the deeper meaning of freedom. She could make choices, yes, but she also had responsibilities. Protecting herself, helping others, and thinking ahead were now part of her life. It was not easy, but it was hers. One afternoon, while resting near a river, Leela asked, "Do humans ever fight without weapons?" Without training, Ethan thought for a moment. Sometimes, we rely on courage, cleverness, and teamwork. Even without weapons, we find ways to survive. Sometimes our brains are our strongest weapon. Leela considered this. On her planet, warriors relied on their bodies and their training. Humans relied on more than just their physical strength. This was a new kind of power, one she was beginning to respect and understand. As days passed, Leela and Ethan became more than partners. They became a team. They understood each other's strengths and weaknesses, and their trust grew. Leela realized that she could rely on someone else without fear. She could share the burden of survival, learn new ways of thinking, and still remain true to herself. One evening, as the sun set over the distant hills, Leela looked at Ethan. "I think I am ready," she said softly. "Ready for whatever comes next, ready to face my past and my future." Ethan smiled. "And I will be there with you. We will face it together." For the first time in her life, Leela Kane felt completely prepared, not just to fight, but to live. She had survived her past, faced new challenges, and learned that strength was more than muscle. It was choice, trust, courage, and intelligence. The enemy from her home planet would not stop easily, but Leela no longer feared them. She was ready. She was strong. She was free. And as the stars twinkled above Earth, Leela Kane knew that her life was no longer defined by orders or duty. It was hers. Completely and fully hers. The days passed quietly at first, but Leela Kane knew it was only a matter of time before her past caught up with her again. The patrols from her home planet were relentless. They had tried before, and they would try again, stronger and better prepared. Leela had trained herself to expect danger, but now she understood something new. Survival was not just about skill, but about thinking ahead, anticipating every move, and using the world around her to her advantage. Ethan had taken them to a secluded area near a mountain range. It was remote and few humans came here. The forests were thick, the terrain uneven, and the rivers cut through the valleys like silver threads. Leela studied the area carefully. She had learned to see opportunities in every tree, every rock, every slope. "They will come," she said one morning, adjusting her armor. "And we must be ready." Ethan nodded. "We will be ready, but we need a plan. We cannot just wait for them to attack. We have to take action." Leela agreed. They began setting traps, building defenses, and creating signals. Ethan showed her ways humans defended themselves that were different from anything she had seen on her planet. Camouflage, deception, and coordination became their weapons. Leela adapted quickly, combining her combat skills with these new strategies. The first attack came at night. Leela was on watch, her eyes scanning the dark forest. Ethan had prepared the ship as a base, and together they had rigged alarms to detect movement. Shadows flickered through the trees, and Leela's instincts told her they were not alone. "They are here," she whispered, gripping her energy rifle. From the darkness, soldiers emerged. They were elite warriors trained to capture her without question. But Leela and Ethan were ready. Ethan activated the traps he had set, sending nets and barriers to slow the attackers. Leela moved with speed and precision, striking when it mattered most. Her blade cut through the air, her shots hitting targets accurately. Each move was calculated, blending her instincts with the strategy she had learned from Ethan. The battle was fierce. Leela noticed that these soldiers were better than the ones before. They worked together, using tactics she had not faced until now, but she was ready. She had trained, learned, and adapted. She moved like a shadow, striking where they were weakest and retreating before they could respond. Ethan supported her, using the terrain and his knowledge of human tactics to outsmart the attackers. He was not as strong as Leela, but he was clever, and that made a difference. He used the environment, setting traps, creating distractions, and guiding Leela to positions where she could strike most effectively. Hours passed, and the battle raged on. Leela felt her muscles ache, but she did not stop. She was fighting not just for survival, but for freedom. Every move she made was her own choice. She was no longer a weapon of the Empire. She was herself, deciding her own actions, her own destiny. At one point, a soldier managed to corner Ethan. Leela reacted instantly, rushing to his side. She disarmed the soldier with a swift motion, then used his momentum to take down another attacker. Ethan looked at her, impressed. "You are incredible," he said as they regrouped. "You taught me to think," Leela replied. "Not just to fight, I am stronger because of it." The attackers finally retreated, realizing they could not win. Leela and Ethan were victorious, but the fight had shown them that the Empire would not give up. They would come again, more prepared, more determined. The next day, Leela and Ethan surveyed the area. They reinforced their defenses, placing traps and warning signals. They trained, combining Leela's combat skills with Ethan's tactics. Every day, Leela grew stronger, faster, and smarter. She learned to anticipate enemy moves, to adapt quickly, and to use the environment to her advantage. Ethan watched her with admiration. She had changed since the day he had found her. She was no longer just a warrior. She was a leader, a strategist, and a partner. He could trust her with decisions, and she could trust him to support her. Together, they were a force that even the Empire could not easily overcome. One evening, as they rested near a river, Leela spoke softly. "I never thought I could feel this safe, not because there is no danger, but because I know I can face it. I know I am not alone." Ethan smiled. "You are learning that strength is not just about fighting. It is also about trust, preparation, and courage. You have all of these, Leela." She looked at him thoughtfully. "I have always been strong, but now I see that strength alone is not enough. I must think, plan, and trust. That is a new kind of power." Days passed, and the Empire sent more soldiers. This time they were larger in number and more organized. Leela and Ethan prepared carefully, using everything they had learned. They set traps, planned ambushes, and coordinated their movements. When the attackers arrived, they were met with a well-prepared defense. The battle was intense. Soldiers moved through the forest, trying to find weaknesses in their defenses. Leela used her instincts, her weapons, and the terrain to outmaneuver them. Ethan guided her, using strategy and careful observation to exploit their mistakes. They fought through the night. Leela's movements were precise, combining strength and skill with strategy. Ethan used his knowledge to support her, creating opportunities and forcing the enemy to make errors. Together, they turned what could have been a desperate fight into a victory. When the last soldiers retreated, Leela felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced her past, survived the attacks, and learned to fight in a new way. She was no longer a weapon for the Empire. She was herself, a free warrior, capable of choosing her own battles and defining her own destiny. Ethan approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it, you faced them and won, not just with strength, but with intelligence and courage." Leela nodded, breathing heavily. "I have learned that strength is more than power. It is also strategy, trust, and freedom. I am stronger now because I choose my path." The battles had tested them, but they had also taught them more about each other. Leela trusted Ethan not just with her life, but with her decisions. Ethan trusted Leela to act wisely and with courage. Together, they were more than just a human and an alien warrior. They were a team capable of facing any challenge. As the sun rose over the mountains, Leela looked at the horizon. She thought of her past, of the empire that had tried to control her, and of the freedom she now had. She had fought, learned, and grown. She was no longer bound by duty or orders. She was herself, and she could choose her own future. Ethan stood beside her. "The Empire will not stop," he said. "They will come again, but we are ready, and you are ready." Leela smiled, feeling a sense of pride and determination. "I am ready. Whatever comes, I will face it. Not because I have to, but because I choose to." They spent the next days reinforcing their position and preparing for future challenges. Leela trained in combat, strategy, and survival, while Ethan taught her more about human tactics and technology. Each day, she became stronger, more confident, and more capable. The Empire's attacks would come again, but Leela was no longer afraid. She had faced the past, learned new ways to fight, and built trust with someone who respected her choices. She was no longer just a warrior of her empire. She was a free fighter, a strategist, and a leader. And as they looked at the forest around them, Leela Kane knew that her life was changing forever. She was no longer a tool for others. She was herself, capable of shaping her destiny and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battles had taught her many things. Strength alone was not enough, trust could be powerful, and freedom was worth fighting for. She had learned to combine her skills with new strategies, to think ahead, and to fight not just for survival, but for a future she could choose. For the first time, Leela Kane felt completely alive. She had faced the Empire, survived attacks, and discovered a new way of living. She had found a partner in Ethan, someone who respected her, trusted her, and fought alongside her. And most importantly, she had found herself, not just as a warrior, but as a free being ready to shape her own destiny. The Empire would come again, but Leela Kane would be ready. Stronger, smarter, and free, she knew that no force could control her again. She had learned, adapted, and grown. She was ready for the battles to come, but she was also ready for life, choice, and the future she would create for herself. And as the stars shone above Earth, Leela Kane and Ethan Clarke prepared for the next chapter, knowing that together they could face anything. The Empire had grown impatient. Weeks after their last failed attack, a massive fleet approached Earth. Leela Kane and Ethan Clarke watched from their hidden base as the enemy ships emerged from the clouds, their engines glowing menacingly. This time they had come not just for capture, they had come for total control. Leela's heart pounded, but she did not show fear. Years of training and the battles she had faced with Ethan had prepared her for this. She looked at him. "They are stronger this time. We must be smart. We cannot fight them all head-on." Ethan nodded. "I have a plan, but we will need every advantage we have." "You are ready for this, Leela?" She tightened her armor and checked her weapons. Her blade had been sharpened, her rifle calibrated, and her mind clear. She felt the weight of responsibility, but also the excitement of purpose. For the first time, she was fighting not as a pawn or a soldier of the Empire, but as herself, a free warrior making her own choices. They set traps throughout the forest and surrounding hills. Ethan had coordinated with local humans who had been recruited quietly, teaching them basic defensive tactics and using them to slow the enemy. Leela trained them in ways they could understand, showing them how to move, hide, and fight without fear. When the Empire's forces landed, they were met with a coordinated defense. Leela moved like a shadow through the battlefield, striking quickly and retreating before the enemy could respond. Her knowledge of terrain and combat strategy made her unstoppable. She combined her raw power with the techniques she had learned from Ethan, creating a pattern the enemy could not predict. Ethan guided the smaller groups, using human ingenuity to create diversions, set traps, and outmaneuver the enemy. His calm voice over the communicator reached Leela, giving her directions that she followed instinctively. Their teamwork was seamless. Where humans lacked strength, they had cleverness, and where the Empire lacked adaptability, Leela had strategy. Hours passed, and the battle raged across the forests and mountains. Leela moved from one skirmish to another, always in control, always calculating. The soldiers of her empire were powerful, but they had never faced someone who could think like her and fight like a human. Every time they adapted, she adapted faster. Every time they struck, she anticipated and countered. At one point, the Empire's commander appeared, a tall, imposing figure who had trained Leela personally in her youth. He had expected her to be obedient, to follow orders, to be just another weapon. Instead, he found a warrior who was free, confident, and unstoppable. "Leela Kane," he shouted, "you will obey. You belong to the Empire." Leela stepped forward, her blade raised. "I belong to no one," she said. "I fight for myself. I choose my own destiny." They clashed in a battle of skill and strength. The commander was powerful, but Leela's combination of raw power, speed, and strategy overwhelmed him. She anticipated his strikes, countered with precision, and finally disarmed him. "You are free," Ethan called from a distance, watching the fight. "You always were. Now you are showing them." Leela's victory over her former trainer was symbolic. The Empire had underestimated the strength of choice, of freedom, of courage combined with intelligence. Their soldiers began to retreat, demoralized and confused by the tactics Leela and Ethan had used. As the last of the enemy forces fled, Leela stood tall, her chest heaving, her eyes scanning the battlefield. She had won, but more than that, she had proven that strength without choice was nothing. She had shown that even the fiercest warrior could be guided by intelligence, trust, and courage. Ethan approached her, smiling despite the exhaustion. "You did it, Leela. You changed everything." "I only did what I had to do," she replied, lowering her blade. "But we did it together." The aftermath was quiet but meaningful. Leela and Ethan helped the local humans rebuild and recover. They showed them how to defend themselves and how to work together. Leela trained them not just to fight, but to think, to adapt, and to survive. Her lessons were simple but effective. Courage, strategy, and cooperation could overcome even the strongest enemy. Leela spent time reflecting on her journey. She had left her home planet, faced her past empire, and learned new ways to live and fight. She had found trust, friendship, and freedom. For the first time, she could imagine a life that was truly her own. Ethan watched her thoughtfully. "You've changed," he said. "Not just as a warrior, but as a person. You see the world differently now." Leela nodded. "I have learned that freedom is not just about being alive. It is about choice. It is about deciding what is right, what is important, and who you want to be. I am no longer just a fighter. I am myself." The humans around them looked at Leela with admiration. She was no longer just an alien warrior. She was a symbol of hope and courage. Children whispered stories about her bravery, and adults shared tales of her strategy and strength. Her presence inspired people to believe that even the impossible could be overcome with courage, intelligence, and determination. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Leela and Ethan sat together, watching the sky. The battle was over, the Empire had retreated, and for the first time there was peace. "I never imagined this life," Leela said softly. "I thought I was just a tool, a weapon. Now I feel like I can do anything." "You can," Ethan said. "You've already done more than most warriors ever dream, and this is only the beginning." Leela looked at him, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Ethan, for showing me a different way, for trusting me, for helping me become who I am." Ethan smiled. "You did it yourself. I only helped you see it." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their past, hopes for the future, and dreams that seemed impossible only weeks before. Leela felt a sense of belonging she had never known. She had left behind the Empire, the strict rules, and the endless battles for obedience. Now she had freedom, friendship, and a future that she could shape. In the following weeks, Leela and Ethan began helping humans and aliens prepare for future threats. Leela trained them in combat, strategy, and survival, combining her experience as a warrior with the new ideas she had learned from Ethan. She became a leader, not through fear or command, but through example, respect, and skill. The Empire would always exist somewhere in the galaxy, but Leela Kane had proven that they could not control her. She had turned fear into strength, obedience into freedom, and skill into leadership. She was no longer just a warrior. She was a force that inspired hope, courage, and change. One morning, as they prepared to leave the area for a new mission, Leela looked at the horizon. The sun rose over forests, rivers, and mountains, casting light over the land. She felt a deep sense of peace. "This world is different from mine," she said. "It is softer, yes, but it also needs warriors, people who can fight, think, and protect." Ethan nodded. "And you will be that warrior, Leela, not because you have to, but because you choose to." She smiled. "I choose to, and I choose to help others find their strength too." As they boarded the ship, Leela took one last look at the land below. She had fought battles, faced enemies, and learned new ways to live. She had discovered courage, trust, and freedom. Her destiny was no longer dictated by anyone but herself. Ethan started the engines, and the ship lifted into the sky. Leela felt the hum beneath her feet, the wind against her face, and the stars above. She was ready for whatever came next. She was strong, wise, and free. For the first time, she looked at the universe not as a place of rules and battles, but as a world of opportunity. She could choose her path, face challenges with courage, and help others do the same. She was a warrior, a leader, and a symbol of hope. Leela Kane had been bought, trained, and controlled, but none of that defined her anymore. She had rewritten her destiny with her own hands. The Empire could not take her past, her skill, or her courage. And the universe had seen that even the fiercest warrior could change, grow, and become something greater than anyone expected. As the ship soared through space, Ethan turned to her. "Where to next?" Leela smiled, looking at the stars stretching endlessly ahead. "Wherever we are needed, there are people to protect, lessons to teach, and a universe to explore." Ethan nodded. "Then let's go." Together, they traveled onward. Leela Kane, the warrior who had been bound and trained by an empire, had become a free fighter, a strategist, and a symbol of courage. Her journey had tested her strength, her mind, and her heart, but in the end, she had claimed her destiny. And as the stars glittered around them, Leela Kane knew that she would never be controlled again. She was free, powerful, and ready to face whatever the universe held. Her life was hers, and she would shape it with courage, wisdom, and choice. The Earthling had bought a warrior, but in the end, she had become more than anyone had imagined. A force that could not be tamed, a hero who would inspire countless others, and a warrior who finally owned her destiny.